Hey friend, welcome back to another pottery tutorial. So today for August, we are going to be doing a cappuccino mug and saucer set. So I'm really excited about this one. Let's get into it. First thing, of course, you just need to cut out all of your template pieces. And with this one, some of the template pieces do need to be assembled. So you're going to need to tape together C1 and C2. And then everything's ready to go. Exciting new thing about this template is I added a handle guide. This was something that folks were having a little bit of trouble with to get the right shape for the handle. And so this should really help you get your handle to look like how I make my handles. So we're going to be rolling out 2 different slab thicknesses today. We're going to start with a 1/2 centimeter slab. And with this 1/2 centimeter slab, we're going to cut out C1, C2, and C4. So this is going to be the body of our cappuccino cup. Once those are cut out, just set them aside. I like to put them on another wedging board, and I'm going to go ahead and put them in front of the fan to start firming up while I roll out the second slab. The second slab is going to be 1 centimeter thick, and this is for the 2 final pieces. This is going to be for the saucer and the handle. You can, of course, do the saucer and the handle also with 1/2 centimeter, but I really prefer them to be a little bit bulkier. They're just a little bit nicer, I think, when they are a bit thicker. Once those are cut out, just put those in front of the fan as well. Once they've firmed up a little bit, we're going to start with assembling the body of the mug. So I'm starting with the curved piece. This is C1, and you want to cut each side at a 45-degree angle. You want to score it and potentially add some slip. I added a little bit of water here and just attach it together. Now, in case this is the first one of my videos you're watching, just be aware that you don't need to make this seam perfect when you're first attaching it. In fact, it's better to let the seam kind of firm up a little bit before you work out that seam. So just get it attached, blend it a little bit, but then you just want to set it aside for now. Don't worry, we'll get back to it later. Now you want to repeat exactly with C2. We're just going to assemble these 2 parts before we attach them together. Okay, so now you want to make sure you're positioning your pieces so that they're as perfectly circular as you can get them. Now we're going to attach these 2 sides together. So what you want to do is score each side, and then also if you want to, add a little bit of slip or water here. This just depends on your clay. And then attach them. So this should line up nicely. Just make sure each part of the wall is attached, and then you can use gentle but firm pressure to push it down. So because these seams are kind of at a weird angle, it's at an open angle, you want to add a little bit of clay into that seam. So I'm just rolling out a little coil. This is about a pencil thickness. Actually, later on as I'm working this, I'll have wished I used a slightly thinner coil here. But this is also fine. It's just going to take a little bit more work to blend out this seam. So I know it looks kind of crazy right now, but it'll look better once we blended it. Okay, so one thing that really helps is add a little bit of water to the top of the seam, because this is going to loosen up the seam and make it easier to blend. That's what I'm doing there. And then I'm just going to take my rib, or you can use your fingernail or your finger, whatever you like, and blend each side of the coil into the body of the pot. Okay, so we've got a crazy looking blend here right now. This is what I mean by my coil was a little bit thick. Don't worry, we're going to let this seam firm up first before we finish blending that out. It's not good to overwork it when you've just added a bunch of water, so we're gonna let that rest for a minute, and meanwhile we're going to attach the bottom. So as you know, the bottoms are always a little bit bigger. This is so that you can attach them first and then cut them perfectly to size. So you want to set your pot on top of the base and trace around it, score where the base attaches, make sure you're scoring both sides, and then you just attach them together. You can add a little bit of slip or water if you need to. I think I dried out my pieces a little bit too much here, so that's why I'm using water. I don't typically use water when I'm making these attachments, but it is nice to use when you need it. So make sure you got a nice good attachment here. And now while I'm waiting for that seam to firm up, I'm going to go ahead and start working on this seam. So I'm going to scrape off all the extra clay that I didn't need to add and just work methodically. I really like to use a rib at a 90-degree angle to kind of scrape off all the extra clay and just work that seam in. Okay, meanwhile, the bottom is ready to go. So I'm just going to remove that and blend that seam. Okay, back to blending out this connection that we made here. On the plus side, using an extra thick coil here is going to make this seam stronger because we're blending more clay into the walls of the pot, so it's all good. And then I did have a few scoring marks on the inside, so what I like to do is just use a paintbrush with some water to smooth out those scoring lines. Ta-da! Okay, now it's time to add the handle. So if you want to have a handle like mine, I definitely recommend you use this shaping guide. This is just a really classic handle shape, but of course you can do whatever handle you like on your cappuccino. So to use this shaping guide, you want to bend the handle shape to match the guide. And if your clay is a little bit dry like mine was, you might need to blend out any cracks that appear. Don't worry, just smooth those out with your finger. And following the guide, you just want to cut the handle ends to follow the contours of the cup. Okay, now we're going to attach it. So what you want to do is hold your handle up to your mug, find a good spot where you like it, and then I like to just mark it with my needle tool so I know where to score. So I'm going to score both sides on the mug and also on the handle. And then you can use a little water or slip and press it into the mug. So check my left hand here. You definitely want to be supporting the inside of your mug as you attach the handle. You don't want to push into your mug without supporting that wall because you could mess it up. And then just blend it how you like it. So this entire pot, there's still blending and cleaning up that we need to do, but we're going to do that all tomorrow. So for now, just set it aside. And let's work on our saucer. So what we're going to do with the saucer today is we're simply going to turn up the edges. Now, if you're turning up the edge and it just flops back down again, that means your clay isn't quite dry enough. So you'll want to put that in front of the fan or, wait half an hour or something for your clay to firm up. It should be able to hold a rim here. I'm just going to smooth it out nicely. So that's all we're going to do today. You need to be patient with pottery. I mean, to have the tidiest pots, you want to be patient. So what I like to do always is put it under cloth overnight and let it firm up to leather hard. Depending on your studio situation, you might need to use plastic or you might just wait a few hours. It just depends on the humidity in your studio. I have a basement studio, so it's very humid. So just putting it under plastic and waiting until the next day is kind of perfect for getting to that leather hard stage. Now that it's leather hard, you can see it's holding its shape a lot better. So now it's easier to go in a little bit more aggressively and really smooth out any irregularities, any bumps, any nicks, anything that I don't want. I'm gonna go in with my rib or with my finger, and I'm just gonna smooth it all out. Now you just do this to the point that you're happy with it. You know, there's no right or wrong here. The glaze does also cover a variety of sins, so don't worry too much about making it perfect. And then once we're done with the mug, we're going to move on to our saucers. So here's where things get a little interesting. So one of the benefits of creating a slightly thicker saucer is you can actually add a little divot here. So I'm just positioning my mug right on top here, making sure it's nice and centered, and then I'll go ahead and trace around it with my needle tool so I know exactly where my cappuccino mug should be sitting. And then I'm going to take this little loop tool that normally you'd be using for trimming on the wheel, but this is really great for carving as well. So I'm just going to carve back some of this clay to make a little recess where my cappuccino mug can sit inside of. So cute. So that's all we're going to be doing for now. Now I'm going to go ahead and let it dry out, and then we're going to fire it. And here is our final result. I love this cappuccino mug so much. Actually, I hesitate to call it a cappuccino mug because this is also like a perfect tea mug, I think. I'm a huge tea drinker myself, so I really love to have these big, wide, generous mugs to have my tea in. It's just so cozy, and I hate to break it to you guys, but we're heading into autumn already. So this is a really wonderful project for the next months. I hope that you enjoyed. As always, this template will be linked down below in the description. Enjoy, and I'll be back next month with another video. In the meantime, you can find me over on my main channel at Pottery to the People, or over on Instagram, also at Pottery to the People. All right, bye friends. Hey friend, welcome back to another pottery tutorial. Today we're going to make this long-awaited template. This has been a much requested one. This is the coffee drip coffee filter template. So first thing you need to do, as always, is cut out the templates, and then K23 does need to be pasted together with some tape because, you know, the template was just too big to fit on one page. Okay, set that aside. We're going to roll out 2 different slab thicknesses here. I'm going to start with a 1/2 centimeter slab. And if you don't know already, you should definitely be using thickness gauges just to make sure that your slab is the right thickness. Okay, this whole big slab is just going to be for the main part of the coffee drip. This is the cone, this is K23. The other pieces, I recommend you use a slightly thicker slab. So I'm just cutting this piece out and I'm gonna set it aside for now. And then I can use my scraps to make a 1 centimeter thickness slab. So make sure you wedge out any air bubbles, and then you want to use some 1 centimeter thickness gauges to get it to 1 centimeter. With this 1 centimeter slab, we want to cut out the other pieces. That's K24 and K25. It's going to be the base and the ring. A couple people have been asking me lately how much clay you want to start out with. So I usually start out with 1 kilo of clay. Of course, you never end up using all your clay up. There's always leftovers because you're cutting out these shapes. But I do, of course, reuse all of the clay. You're not going to use up that whole 1 kilo, maybe half of it. It just depends on which template exactly you're using. Okay, and then as usual, if you watch my videos before, you know I always put my slab pieces in front of a fan first to firm up before I continue working with them. If you do this or not, it just depends on the clay that you're using, but my clay is a little bit loose, so I like to firm it up before I start working with it. You want it to still be bendable, but I don't want it to be floppy. So I usually put it in front of the fan for about 10 minutes. Okay, and then we're going to start with assembling the cone first. So you want to cut the straight ends at a 45-degree angle. And of course, make sure you flip it in between so that the 45-degree angles overlap. I have this great angle cutter tool, but if you don't have this tool, no worries. You can just use a knife or a needle tool. And then you just want to overlap them and press them together. I always have to do these things at such an awkward angle so that the camera can pick it up so you guys can see, but hopefully you can see clearly what I'm doing here. And of course, don't forget the inside as well. If you're getting any cracks, just feel free to rub them out. And now we're going to move on to the ring. So once again, 45-degree angles, make sure you flip it in between. Score, use slip if you need to. I don't need to use slip with my clay. If I feel the need, I'll just use a little bit of water. And then this is kind of a tight turn here, which means your clay is going to be more prone to cracking. So just turn it, make sure you have a good connection there. And if you see any cracking along the edges here, like I'm smoothing out right now, that's totally fine. Just smooth it out with your finger. My clay does have a tendency to crack a little bit, so your clay might not do that, hopefully. And then we're going to attach the ring first. This is much easier than to do the cone first. So you want to place the ring, obviously center it, score both sides, and attach. And then I like to use a paintbrush with just some water on it to smooth out any extra scoring marks. It just tidies it up a little bit, but of course you want to make sure you're not adding too much water. So that's the little ring that's going to sit inside of the cup. And then because we're going to be adding the cone now, I really recommend you add some support here. So I found that my 1 centimeter thickness gauges plus the 0.5 centimeter thickness gauges are the perfect height to support the base. I just want to make sure that I'm not distorting and pushing down the base as I'm working, because even if you flatten it out later, clay does have memory. So if this wobbles a little bit while you're working on it, you might end up with warping later on. So you want to center your cone on top. I was talking over it, but you do want to pat the cone down a little bit into your wedging board to flatten out that edge a little bit, just so that it's more stable as you're attaching it here. Mark where it's attached, score both sides, and then don't worry, we're going to add a little bit more support in a minute. So press it in as nicely as you can without warping the base. Make sure that it's nice and stable. And if it can sit, great. If not, you can just hold it up. Maybe I should have done this before attaching, but you do want to roll out a coil. This should be about a pencil thickness, something like that. And then we're going to use this coil to press in and support our cone. So I'm just slowly working it in. This takes a while, don't worry, and you want to blend it up into the cone and down into the base if you want a seamless look. especially with dishware, anything to do with food, you want to be able to put it in your dishwasher. You want to be able to clean it thoroughly. So any cracks here, you do want to get rid of, because food can get stuck in those cracks and, you know, bacteria can grow in them. Okay, the rest we are going to do tomorrow. I want my coffee drip to firm up to leather hard tonight so that I can carve in the grooves later on and, you know, do the final cleaning up. So depending on the humidity in your studio, I usually put a piece of cloth over it and then just let it sit overnight to firm up. That works well in my basement studio, but if you live in a more arid place, you might rather cover it with plastic. Just depends on your studio situation and how much water you added to your clay. First, I'm going to go ahead and tidy everything up. I'm going to smooth out the sharp edges. You can see here there's a few like squiggly bits on the edges and just like sharpness. So if it's dry enough, I like to use my rib to kind of shave off those edges, and then I'll go back in with my finger to smooth it out. If you can't shave it, just smooth it out with your finger, and I'll go over the whole piece that way. Get it nice and smooth before we do the next steps. Okay, the next step is to carve the grooves. So I have this tiny little loop tool that I like to use for these detail works. But you can use any sort of trimming tool you have. The loop tool that comes in like a standard beginner's pottery kit is also totally fine. It might be a little bit bigger of a groove than what I'm having here, but it's totally fine. We want to carve these grooves so that the coffee can drip through the filter and just like slide down the grooves to the bottom of the cup. So this is actually a really important part for the functionality of your coffee drip. You need to have some sort of texture on the outside so that the coffee can drip through. And if you've waited to the right amount of moisture level in your clay, carving this can be a real pleasure. If you have any sharp edges, you can just rub them out with your finger. Okay, now it's time to add the hole. So I'm using a hole cutter here. I'm going to put up on the screen exactly how wide it is because I can't remember off the top of my head. But if you don't have a hole cutter, you can also just use a drill bit. And the width of your hole cutter or drill bit doesn't really matter that much. I've been told by coffee experts that it's the filter that slows down the drip. It's not actually the hole. So the hole can be a bit bigger or smaller, whatever you like. So I'm going to let it dry for about a week before I load it into the bisque kiln. And as usual with these templates, I just go for a nice white glaze. This is just a very simple white. The speckles that you see in my pottery projects, that is actually iron in the clay. So just look for a clay that has added iron in it, or a speckled clay body if you want to get that same look. Back into the kiln, so I fire at 1240 because this is stoneware. And here is the final result. I think that this piece is not only functional, but it's also just like such a beautiful piece as an art object. You could always add a handle here as well. Some people like to have a handle on their coffee drip. I prefer this nice clean look. And then these are the filters that I use. And this is kind of a standard filter. It's called a Hario V60, but any V60 filter should work. The 60 refers to the angle at which the filter is designed for. So the coffee drip that we have is at a 60-degree angle. And if you fold it nicely, it will fit perfectly. And if you're wondering about the mug that's on screen, this is my tea mug, which is another template that I have available. Now, I hope that you guys enjoyed that video. Please leave any comments down below if you have any questions or you enjoyed the video. That helps please the algorithm gods. Of course, I'll have the template linked down below. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye, friend. Well, hey friends, welcome back to another pottery tutorial. So today we are making a super cute espresso cup. And I love all things tiny, so this one has a special place in my heart. So first thing, of course, you need to cut out all your templates. And then we're going to be rolling up 2 different slabs here today. So first I'm going to do a 1/2 centimeter slab. And on this slab, I'm going to cut out the C10 and the C12 template. This slab is definitely a little bit too big. I started out with 1.2 kilo here, which was definitely more than I needed, but any of the offcuts I'm going to be using to make the second slab. So don't worry, you can always wedge up your clay again if you roll out too big of a slab. In the end, I only used about 400 grams of this clay for this project. So set those 2 template pieces aside, and then we're going to go on to the 1 centimeter slab. And if you don't have thickness gauges yet, I really recommend them. It makes rolling out perfect slabs super easy. So for this 1 centimeter slab, we're going to be cutting out the last 2 templates. That's C13 and C11. So this is the espresso saucer and then also the handle. So a little note when you're cutting out the handle, the C11 template, I personally found it easier to not cut out that little circle in the middle and just use my needle tool to trace through the template. I found that this worked just a little bit neater. Of course, you can cut it out right away, but I preferred to wait a little bit until the handle was a little bit drier. So as usual, I'm going to put my espresso pieces in front of the fan for a little bit to dry out. I'll leave them here for about 10 minutes, and when you let them dry out a little bit, it helps them to be a little bit less floppy, and I just find them easier to work with. Okay, so first things first, we're going to work on the cylinder part of the espresso cup. So as usual with cylinders, you want to cut each side at a 45-degree angle. I have this handy little angle cutter here that makes 45-degree angles really easy, but of course you can just cut it with a needle tool or with a knife, whatever you have. And then each of the cut sides you want to score. And then we're just going to overlap those 2 45-degree angles and press them together. So go ahead and blend them in. It doesn't have to be perfect quite yet. We're going to be doing some more blending later, but just make sure it's really well stuck together at this point. And then we're going to add the bottom here. So this is the smaller circle. Don't confuse it with the saucer thicker slab. This is the 1/2 centimeter slab, that's the smaller circle. And you want to put the body of the espresso cup on it, trace around it, and score each side that's going to be attaching. This is how I like to attach bottoms. I just give them a lot of pats, and I find that to be perfectly sufficient to get them to be attached. This works well with my clay without slip because the clay is still fairly wet here. But of course, if your clay requires slip, you should add slip with all of these attachments that I'm making here. I do like to add a little bit of water just to smooth out any extra scoring lines in the center of the pot. And then go ahead and use your needle tool to cut off all of the extra clay on the bottom and blend the bottom into the wall. Okay, now it's time to add the handle, and what I like to do here is I like to use this opportunity to hide the seam a little bit, so I'll actually put the handle on top of the seam. That way you can completely disguise it from the outside at least. So first thing I'm going to do is cut out this center piece here with my needle tool. And I'm just smoothing it out. And then, yeah, we're just going to attach it just like we attach everything else. So I'm marking with my needle tool where it's going to be attaching. So that I know where exactly to score. So I'll score between my marks, and of course also I need to score the handle. So you always need to score both sides of the pieces that you're attaching. I find scoring way more important than slip. As you can see, I don't use slip, but scoring is actually really, really important. And then, yeah, just attach it. And once again, I'm using a little bit of water to smooth out any extra scoring lines. And there we have it. Our little espresso cup is fully assembled. We're not totally done with it. I'm going to do some more smoothing later, but for now, we're going to leave it as it is and move on to the saucer. So for the saucer, the first thing I like to do is take some time to smooth out the edges. Now you can be as particular with this as you like. I just like to smooth out any sharp edges and just make everything look, smooth. And then to make the saucer shape, I'm going to use my thumbs to kind of turn up the edges. Now, if your clay is sufficiently dry enough, it should be able to hold this turned up edge. If you're finding that your edge just kind of flops right back down, you want to put it back in front of the fan for a little bit, or just, wait some time for it to dry out. It should be able to hold this shape if your clay is dry enough. Okay, so that's actually all we're going to do today, but I do have some more things that I want to do tomorrow once it's leather hard. So for now, I'm just going to set them aside. Of course, I couldn't resist making a second pot. And I'm going to cover them with some fabric for the night. So first things first, once our pot is leather hard, I'm going to go ahead and spend some time smoothing out any rough edges. I can get in there with my finger or with a rib to just really make it nice and crispy. Once again, just, do this to the point where you're satisfied with it. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is the whole point of hand making pottery. So that's what he looks like when he's done. Now, this part is completely optional, but I really like to add a little bit extra to the saucer by adding a divot that fits underneath the cup. So what you want to do is center your cup on your saucer and trace around it. So I'm just using my needle tool to make a little line. And then I'm going to go in with a trimming tool or a carving tool. So this is like a very basic standard trimming tool that is in pretty much any beginner pottery kit. Doesn't need to get more complicated than that. And then I'm just going to slowly but surely remove some of the clay and create that little divot. If you wanted to and you have access to a wheel, you could also bring this over to the wheel, but I wanted to show you a way that you can do this without a wheel. And there you go, it fits really nicely in there. Now that our pot is finished, I'm going to pop it into the kiln. I'm doing a bisque fire first, and then I'll glaze it with some white glaze. So y'all ask me quite often what kind of glaze I'm using. I'm using a very basic white glaze from Carl Jaeger. It's the cheap stuff. It's nothing complicated. If you're looking for that speckled look, that's actually in the clay itself. So I also get my clay from Carl Jaeger. This is the 32 clay, which has iron in it that makes these nice speckles. So look for a clay that has some speckles in it if you want to have the speckled clay look. And here is the final result. I find these to be so completely adorable. I could also see sizing up this template to make a larger cup. I really love this kind of modern style handle, and it doesn't need to stay as an espresso cup. You could size it up. If you change the settings of the scale in your printer, you could go ahead and size this template right up to pretty much any size you wanted to. And it would be a really cool little modern teacup. Whatever you like. I also love the tiny version, of course. So I hope that this tutorial was helpful for you. I hope that you love the template. It will be linked down below in the video description, and you can go ahead and check out my website if you're looking for more templates. I've got loads. All right, friends, I'll see you next month with a new template. Hey friends, welcome back to another pottery tutorial. This month in honor of Valentine's Day, we are making this adorable heart mug. So first what you want to do is roll out a 1/2 centimeter slab. And I rolled out a little bit too much clay here, that's why I'm cutting some off. And with this 1/2 centimeter slab, you want to cut out 1 HM3 piece and 2 HM1 pieces. So that's going to be the base and the body of the mug. And if you're printing on pretty thin computer paper like I am to stop the template from curling up, you can just very lightly use your rolling pin over the templates themselves, and that will stick them properly to your slab. Okay, we're going to use these scraps to roll out a 1 centimeter slab now for the handle. So this is HM2. Now that we have all of our pieces, it's time to start assembling. So we're going to start with the body of the mug. That's these 2 rectangular pieces. And I want you to cut each short end at a 45-degree angle. And what's really important is make sure you flip the rectangle in between. So each 45-degree cut is on the opposite side. This is going to make the sides of the heart line up properly. And if you don't have this little angle cutter that I have, that's totally fine. Just use a needle tool or a knife. And then we're going to start shaping it into a heart shape. So these seams are really important and they're a little bit tricky to do. Just do your best. So when you're assembling it here, my advice is to just focus on the seams right away. Don't worry so much about the shape of it right now. Just get those seams really well stuck. And if you're finding that your seams are looking a little weak, if you're worried about cracking, something you can also do is add a little coil to those seams to reinforce them a little bit. It's totally not necessary. I'm not doing it here, but it's something that you can do if you're not feeling super confident about your seams. Once your seams are well attached, try and, shape the heart to the shape that you would like it to be and place it on top of the HM3 piece, so the bottom of the heart mug. If you're having trouble shaping it, the walls of the mug should follow the shape of the base, the HM3 piece, with roughly a 1/2 centimeter gap all the way around. So you can also use this base piece to shape the mug. Okay, and then once it's shaped, we want to trace around the edges so we know exactly where to score. Remove it once again and score both sides. We're going to attach this just like we would attach any cylinder to any base. It's just a little complicated because you have to be careful with those seams. Make sure it's really well attached. And then once you're confident it's well attached, you can cut off the excess. And then go ahead and blend the base into the sides of the mug. And then I like to use a rib here to get a really clean kind of cut here, but also don't worry that it's not perfect yet because we're going to come back once it's leather hard to make this seam just invisible. Okay, now it's time to add the handle. So we're going to take our last piece and shape it into a handle shape. So this handle is designed to go on the point of the heart. However, if you want to stick the handle somewhere else, just don't cut out those two little triangular pieces. Just cut straight across when you're cutting out your handle, and you can put the handle anywhere else on the mug. And now I'm going to set it aside for leather heart. So you can see here that it's still a little bit off. It's not perfectly smoothed in yet. So I want to wait until it's leather hard. So for me in my basement studio, that is until the next day. Depends on the humidity and the environment in your studio. It might just be an hour or two for you. And then I'm going to go ahead and smooth it out a little bit more here. I'm shaving off some extra clay. Just smooth it out to the point that you're happy with it. The glaze will cover a few imperfections, and a little imperfections are just fine. Now our mug is done, and about a week later we can pop it into the kiln for the bisque. I'm going to go ahead and glaze it white like I do for all my template samples, but I think that this piece would look really beautiful in a pink or a red color. Of course, for Valentine's Day. I'm wiping the glaze off the bottom so it doesn't stick to my kiln shelf. And back into the kiln. And here's the final result of our heart mug. I love it so much. I'm so relieved that it didn't crack along those edges. Once again, the seam is quite a tricky one, so don't worry if you're getting a little bit of cracking. This mug is a really hearty mug. It should hold 300 milliliters of water or tea, assuming a 10% clay shrinkage rate. That's a half of a pint. It's the perfect size for a cozy February afternoon. All right, friends, I'll see you in the next one. Well, hey friends, welcome back to another pottery tutorial. So today is a very practical project. I'm really excited about this one. This is the travel mug that's designed to fit in your cup holder. So first thing, as always, is cut out your templates, and then you're going to need to paste together the C6 template because it was just a little bit too big to print out on a normal sized piece of paper. So I'm going to be wedging up 1,200 grams for this project. I'm definitely not going to be using it all, but this should be a big enough slab to contain all of our templates. And first, I'm rolling out a 1/2 centimeter slab. And when you're rolling out slabs, make sure you flip as you go and you roll it out nice and evenly. I really recommend using thickness gauges to help you with your slab thickness. Okay, so with the 1/2 centimeter slab, we're going to be using that for most of the template pieces. So everything except the handle. So this is C6, C7, and C8. Go ahead and cut those out. And while we roll out a slab for the handle, I'm going to put these pieces in front of the fan so they can firm up. Just like all of my template tutorials, I do recommend you firming up your clay pieces a little bit before you start working with them because it just makes it a little bit easier. I usually keep them in front of the fan for about 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to be using the scraps for the handle. I don't need too much clay. So for this one, I'm rolling out a full centimeter slab here. I really like my handles to be a little bit thicker than the rest of the piece. I just find when they're 1/2 centimeter, just like the rest of the pieces, they're just a little bit too delicate and they're not so easy to hold. So that's why I recommend going for a full centimeter for the handle, but you know, do whatever you want. Okay, so these have firmed up a little bit. Now we're going to start with the body of the travel mug. So that's the big piece here. And I've got this very handy angle cutter tool. You don't need this tool, but you do want to cut at a 45-degree angle, so you can use a needle tool or a knife to do so. if you don't have this amazing angle cutter tool. And then of course, go ahead and score both sides. So you're gonna cut both sides at a 45-degree angle and score both sides. And if you're confused about which side you are working with, we're working with the straight sides here, not the curved sides. And then go ahead and try to connect these two sides. So this is a rather tall piece, so you're gonna need to, at least I needed to, flip it halfway in between and just work these two seams together. As usual, we're going to be doing a lot of cleaning up at the end, so you don't need to worry right now about making the seam perfectly invisible. Just get it really well attached right now. And don't forget to smooth out the inside as well. Okay, now we want to attach the bottom. So now you want to take the round piece and center the body of the mug onto this piece. As always, it's a little bit bigger. That's totally fine. You want to use your needle tool to trace where it's going to sit, score both sides, and then attach them. And then once they're attached, that's when we are going to cut off the extra. This is the best way to get the cleanest lines, is attach first, then cut, with all your slab pottery projects. And then once again, we're just going to work in that seam. Don't worry about it being too perfect right now. You can use your fingers for this. I also like to get some ribs involved as needed. Just do whatever feels right for you. Okay, now we're going to be working with the top part. This is the part that's going to stop your coffee from spilling into your face as you're driving around. So this part is a little bit trickier because it's not a full circle. So I recommend laying it on. Make sure you leave a little bit of a gap around there, just like I am. And then you want to use a small piece of clay. I'm just using an offcut here to support the rest of your piece. So we're just gonna leave that little strip of clay there until we have it fully attached. So as you saw, I just marked where the pot sits, and we're going to score where it attaches here. I don't know how well you can see that with the front shot, but you can see it a little bit better here. We're just scoring the two parts basically that are attaching. And just like the bottom, we're gonna trim the excess after we attach. Okay, here's where our travel mug lid guide comes in handy. So what you want to do is center this on the lid, and we're going to use this to cut a more ergonomic shape. So this little curve here is going to give your nose some space so that you can properly drink out of it. So you definitely want to cut out this little section here. It is not fun to neither drink from this mug if it's not cut away or clean it as well. And then for the, what do you call this? The drinking hole part? You want to just trace it right now. I don't like to cut this part out right now because my clay is just too wet right now. It would make a really sloppy hole here. So what I like to do is just use the template to trace through to, mark exactly where it needs to go. And then I'm gonna go ahead and cut that out later when it's leather hard. And then also keep in mind there's a little rough edge here where the two slabs come to meet. So I like to just smooth those down and make a little smooth transition there. So now it's time to work on the handles. So if you want to have that nice arcing curve, you do want to cut at a 45-degree angle on each side so it can mold to the shape of the cup. You can also, like choose a different handle shape. That's totally fine too, but this is kind of, the classic, very ergonomic handle shape. Okay, so the handle placement for this piece is actually pretty important. So if you're right-handed, make sure that the handle is to the right of the lid. Like, just think about how you're going to be drinking it. If you're going to be holding it in your right hand, you want that lid part to be facing you and not away from you. I don't know how else better to describe it than that. But just think about how you're going to be actually holding the mug from the handle. And then just like all my handles, this attaches exactly the same way. You're going to want to mark where it's attached, score both sides, and then go ahead and attach it. And some people like to use slip here for these attachments. I don't find it necessary with my clay at this level of wetness in my clay, but just do what your clay is asking you to do. If it's not attaching at all, definitely add some water or some slip and then blend. So this piece is done for the day. If you've seen my other tutorials, I pretty much always let the piece dry out a little bit overnight until it's leather hard so that I can do the final tidying up, and I'm also going to cut out that little drinking hole. So I like to wrap my piece in cloth overnight. That works really well for the climate in my studio. Basically, just try and get it to leather hard so it'll be a little bit firmer and you're not going to distort your piece so much as you're cleaning it up. And then go ahead and tidy it up to the point that you're happy with it. My piece was a little bit, actually, I let it sit too long, so it was a little on the drier side, so it was a little hard to tidy up this time. But I still went in and just, with my finger or with a rib, just kind of do the best you can to tidy up your seams and, smooth out all your edges and whatnot. Okay, so for this, we want to use a 1/2 centimeter drill bit. And I'm going to put on the screen how many inches that is. So if you have a hole cutter in this size, go ahead and use that too. I didn't, so I just use a drill bit. And you want to drill holes on either side of the drinking part and then connect those two holes with a knife. I do recommend using an X-Acto knife because you get the cleanest cuts, but whatever works. Here you go. And then with a tiny little hole like this, you can't really fit your finger in, so go ahead and just use a paintbrush with a little bit of water on it, and you can use that to smooth out the hole. So I'm going to continue to dry my piece upside down with the little scrap support that I got here until it's leather hard, and then I can go ahead and pop it in the kiln. Okay, here is the final result. I'm so happy with this piece. I think this is just like a really practical project. I can't tell you how many times I've taken a mug into my car and assumed that I'm not going to spill it. So enjoy me pretending to drink out of the mug right here. And I hope that this tutorial was fun for you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye, friends.